to ICF Orange County webinar on ICF credentialing. And we're very excited to have all of you here today. And before we begin, I'd like to introduce some board members who are on this webinar. Lori Banks, if you can say hello. She's our Director of Communications. Michael Coffey is our President-elect and Director of Programs. Say hi, hello. And thank you. We've got Sharon Carroll, who is our Finance Director. Hi, Sharon. And we've got our past Finance Director, Raphael Durand, who's also on the call. Say hi, Raphael.
Good morning, everybody.
Hi, and here comes Nanor Ohanessian, who I don't want to put on the spot right away. She's just joining. Hi, Eric, and welcome everybody. And very excited to have all of you here today for 1 hour. Today we are on our third of a 4-part series on ICF credentialing, and a special thanks to ICF Global, who worked closely with our chapter to present the first in March of this year, where we talked about the value of credentialing. And we held part 2 in June and learned about the nuts and bolts of credentialing. And today we're going to talk about other fun things, like how we got to ICO certification and the competencies, the new exam. And part 4 will be held in September. It will round out our series with a sneak peek on team coaching credentialing and what's coming up. So don't forget to sign up for part 4 on our events page at www.icforangecounty.org. Before I turn it over to our speaker, we'd like you to know that we will be sending out the slide deck afterwards to all those who registered, and then our recording will be on our YouTube channel. So let me introduce our speaker, George Rogers. Say hello, George. Give us a wave if you could.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, so excited to have George from ICF Global. He is the Director of Quality Assurance. Since 2007, George has provided direction for the operation and enhancement of ICF's credentialing program. His focus is on developing and implementing standards and processes that help ensure that ICF credentials are of the highest possible quality. During George's tenure, with the assistance of ICF staff and volunteers, the number and quality of credential holders have continued to grow in all regions of the world. And in fact, today we have more than 40,000 ICF credentialed coaches that hold one of the 3 credentials. It's very impressive, and it's growing. George holds a master's in educational administration and has completed advanced training in personnel certification and the accreditation of educational programming. So he's the right guy to talk to us today. He's certified by the Institute of Credentialing Excellence as a credentialing specialist, and he lives in Lexington, Kentucky, in the United States. So over to you, George, and just a quick reminder to please keep yourselves on mute.
And I believe you are muted, Greta. So
I am muted. Go figure.
You were practicing what you preached there. So.
So George will take some questions as we go along, and we'll also field questions at the end. Feel free to put them in chat or raise your hand using the Zoom raise your hand, or just come off mute. So thanks. Over to George.
Well, thank you, Greta, and thanks to all of you for being here today. As Greta said, I'm part of the ICF staff, and I'm almost finishing 16 years working with ICF in a variety of roles, including with credentialing, with our educational programming accreditation, and then also as part of the executive team for a number of years, and now moving into more of a back of the house role around looking at our processes. And so I have a slide deck that I'm going to share with you, and I will try not to read slides to you, but if I don't have the slide deck, I know I'll veer off from the intent of the meeting. So let me go ahead and share a screen here, and I have multiple screens running, so apologies. All right, so Are you seeing the Orange County splash screen there? Very good. Let me sort this page over here real quick. All right. And as Greta indicated, this is the third of a series of credentialing presentations. Some of my colleagues have presented to you previously. And again, I'm really pleased to be here with you today, and I hope the information I share is useful. I think the other ones we've got up here, part one on the value of credentialing, and nuts and bolts of credentialing, and then today talking about our efforts at accreditation, the new exam, and also changes to the core competencies. I see some names here of people that I work with almost every day. In fact, I just got back from a picnic where staff was celebrating meeting our goals for retention of members this year, and that's a really important thing. I know I'm already off track, but I just wanted you all to know that people are continuing to see value in associating with ICF, belonging to ICF, and we were celebrating that today, that we've met some goals that we had set for that, and we're going to continue to work in that area. But today, I want to start with some conversation about our strategic initiative. One of our strategic initiatives is that we want to make sure that we are delivering a high quality experience for the candidates. We want to have really robust standards, but we also want people to have the ability to navigate our credentialing process. It's pretty complicated right now with 3 credentials and multiple paths, and we continue to work on that. But one of the strategic initiatives we have is to improve that. One of the ways that we do that is to align with standards that have been set by global organizations for bodies that credential persons. And so 2 of the most prominent are the International Standards Organization, or ISO, and then another one that is US-based is the National Commission for Credentialing Agencies. When we talk about standards, you know, there are standards for everything in your life, and having and following those standards, especially for our credentialing program, for the processes, for the requirements, for the personnel that are involved in processing applications, for the assessments, and even for the governance of the credentialing program. Those standards help to ensure that our credentials are relevant, that they are fairly and consistently awarded, and that they serve to protect consumers, which is a really big part of what credentials should do. And they also offer value and a growth opportunity for coaches. So I put this quote in here, just a general quote about standards. And again, some of this stuff comes from, you know, safety and a lot of standards in the medical profession or in manufacturing, but we're talking today about standards that apply to bodies that credential persons. So as I mentioned, 2 standards really relevant to credentialing bodies are the ISO 17024 standard and the NCCA standard for the accreditation of certification programs. A lot of you may be familiar with ISO, and most of the time when somebody hears that, they think about a manufacturing process or some business process, but there is a part of ISO that works with conformity assessment. So it is a body of standards that deals with processes, and in this case, a set of processes for bodies that operate the certification of persons. The National Commission for Certifying Agencies standards are very similar to the ISO standards, and let me just share kind of what they cover. The standards include information about governance. For example, the need to have independent governance for the credentialing program. Some of you probably know that a couple of years ago, we began separating the ICF into multiple family organizations under the umbrella of one ICF. One of those is the Credentials and Standards part of the organization. And the reason that was important is because there should not be a conflict of interest within an organization where one part of the organization, for example, says, we need to have, we need to charge this much for the credential so that we can make more money so that we can put on this event, when that's not really relevant to the actual process of credentialing someone. So we have separated the governance. Another area has to do with education and training, and the need to separate the education and training functions from the credentialing functions. So we very intentionally now have the coaching education family organization that works with the accreditation of training and education providers. And they can't have any access to our testing, to our assessments, because that could potentially create a conflict of interest where students from one school might have an advantage over students from another school if they know about the test content. So kind of related back to the governance piece, none of our board members on the ICF credentials and standards boards can be owners or significant contributors to a coach education program, because we want that separation, that firewall there between those two things. The standards also include things around financial and human resources to make sure we have adequate resources to conduct the operations of the program. Over the past few years, we've been able to add some staff to make sure that we are able to handle the volume of applications we get, and we think there's some more work that needs to be done there to continue to streamline or speed up the application and award process. But again, there's a standard around that. A lot of standards around policies. Everything has to be documented so that if I leave or someone on the staff leaves, the policies are very clear about the way we do things. And that is to ensure consistency, that all processes are handled pretty much the same way. So having those policies in place, we've been doing work to that to document the things that we actually do, all the way down to the level of what an individual staff member does in the operation of the evaluation of a credential application. Communications need to be transparent and very clear. We have done some work recently to revise our website, and we know that there's more work that needs to be done on communications, again, with a complicated process like we have. Sometimes people don't read very well, or they don't take time to read some of the things that we put out, but we want to try to provide multiple channels of communications and be very transparent. And I'll give you an example of that later in this presentation when we talk about the passing score for the credentialing exam. Confidentiality is very important. We take extra steps to control the data that we receive, and also not to share information about someone's application or pass-fail status or their credential status if they're in process, as being very important to meeting the standards. The five that I have starred here on the right side around job analysis, exam specifications, exam development, standard setting, and security are ones that I'm going to talk about here in just a few minutes, because they are really the standards that have guided the work we have done to update the core competencies and also to create our new exam. So I'll hold off on talking about those standards a little bit, but the important thing to me is that we are trying to demonstrate to external bodies that our policies and processes align with standards. And part of this will be for us to submit a very detailed application with a rationale for everything that we do, the documentation to support that, and that will be reviewed by external accreditors who are skilled in looking at credentialing programs. I want to say that these are not, the ISO and NCCA standards are not standards for coaching. They are standards for business processes, for the business of credentialing, to make sure that it is, again, in alignment with accepted standards. I have some notes over here on the right that I was going to talk about, and I can't see them. Where did they go? I guess I already said, in essence, what we're doing is we are submitting ourselves to a third-party review. We're having someone who's from the outside, or people from the outside, look at our processes and procedures to make sure that we are aligned with what are accepted as global standards for bodies that issue credentials. So that's what I wanted to say about ISO and NCCA accreditation. And I can't see the chat screen, but I don't know, Greta, did we have any questions specific to this part before I start talking about the next part of the presentation?
Thanks, George. No, I don't see anything in chat. If anyone has a question about this section of the presentation, please feel free to come off mute, raise your hand, or put something in chat.
Okay, and we can always come back to this. We're going to try to leave time at the end for some questions as well. Our plan is to begin submitting application. Well, actually, we've already begun the process of submitting parts of the application, but to finally submit the application probably sometime in 2023. And at that point, there's a desk audit of what we submit, and then there is actually a site visit. I'm not sure how we do a site visit now that we're all working virtually, but we'll have a virtual site visit of some kind. And that will be for the accreditors to come in and say, you know, you say you're doing this, show us you're doing that, show us how you're doing that. That will involve interviews with staff and with the leadership, and probably with some credential holders as well, to ensure that they are having the same experience that we think that they're having or that we want them to have. And they'll be looking for deficiencies, and we'll try to address those. I will say it sounds kind of like like a bunch of hoops we have to jump through, which it is, but the really important thing to me is that we want it to, well, for the past 15 years, these standards have really helped guide our efforts to improve. We have seen where there are deficiencies, and we have tried to make changes to improve the credentialing process. So it forms a really great roadmap for us. So even, I mean, I think earning accreditation from ISO and NCCA is going to be it's going to be a significant accomplishment for ICF as far as the credibility of the credential, the quality of the credentials, the reputation of ICF as a very robust and a body that's an organization that's concerned with quality. But even if we never get the accreditation, it has still led us to do a lot of introspection, a lot of examination of what we do, and to continue to make improvements. So if nothing else, I'm happy about that. All right, let me shift to another topic here. A critical step in earning our external accreditation, and one of the ways that ICF really distinguishes itself from other professional coaching certification bodies, is through the rigorous research that we do. And this research really serves as the foundation for our credentialing process. As most of you probably know, in November of 2019, we completed a two-year research initiative called a coaching job analysis that culminated in the updating of our core competencies. So our updated core competencies really are rooted in this research that we did. And again, that need to do a job analysis aligned with some of the global standards set by ISO and NCCA. During the research, we listened to a lot of coaches. We heard from coaches around the world on the key knowledge, the skills, the abilities that are essential for effective coaching. From start to finish, we had more than 1,300 coaches contribute, both ICF members and non-members from all over the world contributed in this process, either through being parts of panels of subject matter experts or through surveys. They came from, as much as we could make happen, they came from a really diverse range of coaching disciplines, coaching styles, levels of experience, credential levels, geographic regions, as much diversity as we could get, because we really wanted to take that full snapshot of what is going on with coaching. As far as we know, and I would pretty sure this is the case. No other coaching certification body has undertaken this level of research. And I think we're really proud of the quality, the integrity, the validity of the evidence-based approach that we've taken to conduct this study. And it really serves as the basis for our whole credentialing process, including the work to update the core competencies and to create the new ICF credentialing assessment, the credentialing exam that I'll talk about here in just a few minutes. So again, it's really the ability to do this level of research is a differentiating factor for ICF and for credential coaches. Knowing that your credential is grounded in really solid research that affects that is based on what coaches actually do is something that we're really proud of. On the slide there, you can see that kind of some of the steps that or some of the parts of a job analysis. And some of you, if you're worked in the area of human resources or personnel, it may be called a practice analysis or a role delineation study. But what we wanted to see was who we wanted to hear from were coaches who are actually doing the work, who are actually serving as coaches working with clients. And while, academics and researchers were really important to hear from, and we did some literature searches and things like that, but really to know what tasks are being performed, what coaches actually do, we needed to hear from people who are high-performing job incumbents, is what the slide said there. And we wanted to collect their knowledge, their skills, their abilities, and any other characteristics. And as I mentioned already, we had a really broad pool of subject matter experts, or SMEs. We used global practices for conducting a job analysis. And the whole intent is to collect data that we can use to inform our program. It's important for us to do this every 5 to 7 years because we know the profession changes. I'll give you an example. Early on when I started with ICF, we conducted a job analysis similar to this one, not nearly as detailed, but similar. And that one largely reinforced the core competencies as they were at that time. I remember one of the things that we heard at that time was that coaching was taking place either by telephone or face-to-face. And we know since then that there have been some changes with technologies and other ways that coaching may happen. We know that coaching is also happening more within teams or within groups, those kinds of things. So we wanted to hear from practitioners about what changes might have happened. And we'll continue to do that to make sure that our credential remains relevant and that it is actually reflective of coaching practice. So some themes emerged in the job analysis research, and I'm sharing this because this is really what impacted our updates to the core competencies. One of the things that came out really clearly was the importance of ethical behavior and confidentiality. The top 4 to 5 tasks and knowledge items in the survey all related to ethical behavior and confidentiality. And of course that informs, what training ICF or what training an accredited provider needs to offer. It also informs what needs to be on an examination, people's knowledge of the ICF code of conduct or code of ethics. We also saw some themes emerge around expansion of the coaching agreement. So to include the kind of the contractual agreement that that a coach makes with a client, an agreement around the overall engagement of coaching sessions, and then the agreements that happen in an individual session. And that was a little bit of an expansion over what was evident in the previous version of the competencies that did talk about establishing the coaching agreement, but this really clarified it, that there's really those 3 levels of agreement that are important. The contractual agreement, the session plan, and then the plan for multiple sessions, and then the individual session agreement. The research also showed some enhancement of the partnership concept. Really the focus on the client's equal voice in a coaching session or in a coaching conversation, and the accountability, mutual accountability for the client and coach. Also, what came to light was more about the concept of professional development and reflective practice. We had a lot of discussions about mentoring and about supervision, and about professional growth and intentional professional growth. And again, that reflective process. And then there was also information that came to light around coaches working more and trying to understand the client context, the culture, the values of the client and the coach, and have that more holistic view of the client. So those were things that helped inform or were themes that emerged from this job analysis. So as a result, you know, the original core competencies stood for about 25 years ago when they were first developed, and they were really adopted globally. They served very well, and it was really a testament to those that initially conceived those competencies. And what we saw was in this new job analysis is that all of those existing concepts are still there. The updated competencies really include all of the concepts from the original competencies in a little more streamlined manner. It goes from 11 to 8. The language is more consistent in the updated competencies. We expanded some of the concepts and actually combined some of the concepts that were relevant. One thing that shows up in the updated competencies that's a little different is the competencies around the mindset of the coach. And again, just from a copywriter's perspective, it's a more succinct document, reducing the number of words that we hope reducing improving the meaning of those words. The other thing I think it's important to note is that the refinements we made really, with the scope of our job analysis, it really reflects the expansion of the professional community. In 2000, shortly after the core competencies were initially developed, ICF had about 3,200 members, mostly in North America. During the job analysis I mentioned that we had conducted earlier back in 2008, we had about 13,000 members and about 3,000 credential holders in 84 countries. 62% of those were in North America. So a very North America focus came from that job analysis. Today, and I'm looking at the notes that I have in the slides, these are already really inaccurate because now we're up to around 45,000 members. The notes say 29,000, and we're getting close to 50,000 credential holders in 150 something countries. So this latest job analysis took a much broader view of the world of coaching to create the data that to collect the data that we have. And again, the coaching practice has changed some. The body of coaches that ICF is working with has grown just tremendously. Now, if we had a long time, we could talk about each one of the core competencies and the changes that were made. That's kind of beyond the scope of what I can do in this presentation, but I did want to point you to one of many resources that ICF has developed around the updated competencies. And one that I really like is the video series that we created, where we're some of our coaches talk and share about specific competencies. And let me, if you don't have that, I think I can, I don't know whether that will show up as a link or not. Let me see if I can find a link. Well, I will get that link to you because I'm realizing that that is not in the on the slide there. But if you search on YouTube for the ICF channel, and you can see the core competency video series that goes into a lot of depth on it. There's also some other resources on the ICF website that really help explain the kind of crosswalk from the old the former competencies to the current new competencies, and I think that's really valuable for people to take a look at. But I do want to say, if someone has gone to an accredited coach training provider for their to be prepared to take their credential, and now we are assessing and we are working with the updated competencies, they should still be really successful, because again, the concepts that were in the original competencies are carried over to the updated competencies. They just appear in a little bit different format or language and a little more streamlined, but they should be able to be really successful, even if they were trained, 5 years ago and they've stayed active as a coach and they're using the competencies daily. They should be fine with this. But I would encourage them also to look at this video series and also pursue other training around the competencies. Okay, so let me stop again there and see if we have any questions around either external accreditation or around the job analysis and creation of updated competency model. And I apologize if I'm looking away. I have too many screens going here. So
Yeah, so Elena has raised her hand, as has Anna.
yes.
So,
well, please, either one of you, go ahead and unmute. And I don't know who was first, so.
go ahead, Elena.
Hi, my name is Elena, and you had mentioned in this accreditation process for ICF the possibility, well, you kind of indicated that the possibility might exist that ICF does not pursue actual accreditation, if I understood kind of from some of your language. What would prohibit or inhibit ICF from actually moving forward and getting that accreditation?
I think, of course, we definitely intend to apply for accreditation. I think some of the challenges that we have right now have to do with our performance evaluation system. And so we're continuing to work on that to make sure that it meets the standards that ISO and NCCA would have for assessment. And I will just say philosophically, a board could say, this is not the direction we want to go, or this is too restrictive. I'll give you another example. One of the requirements is that our examinations be conducted in a proctored environment. We are doing that right now with our new exam. And, for 12 years or so, we were given the exam just as an internet-based delivery. So now there's a lot of people saying, oh, this is too restrictive or whatever. So a board could say, and no one has had this conversation, no one has brought this up at all, but a board could say, okay, we think this is good enough and we're going to continue with the way it is without seeking further external accreditation. But I will say, for the last many years, gaining accreditation by ISO and NCCA has been a major goal of ICF. And again, what we fully intend to continue to pursue. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify whether the intent was to fully go after it, or if we were just trying, as ICF as a whole was just trying to get some of the elements without getting, like full accreditation. But it sounds like there is the intent to the best of its abilities to actually gain that accreditation.
Fully go after it, yes.
Thank you.
And actually it's a dual certification we're going after, the NCCA and the ISO. Those are two separate processes, and we want to be accredited by both.
Over to Anna now for her question.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Anna.
Hi, George. How are you? First of all, can I say congratulations, and I'm holding the space for the ICF accreditation process. For me, this is an example of walking the talk, because those of us that are out here that have had to go through the credentialing or accrediting process, it is an undertaking. So I'm glad to see that there's a continued level of example that you all are demonstrating. So thank you for that. The question I have about the process is, as you know, again, I've been in that process as well. I'm continuing to be in that process, getting credentialed and accredited for a variety of things. And so any of the standards that you all are setting forth for the ICF, how does that impact those of us that have training schools or training programs, or we're getting credentialed at a higher level? How do those standards trickle down to us in terms of being held to the same standards that you all might have to implement? Is my question clear?
I think so. And so let me say that I think as we make changes, there are some parts of what we do in credentialing that will result in causing changes for coach education providers, for example, perhaps around assessment, or maybe around some of the other qualifications that we have for a credential. I would also say that I think the coach education family organization that is working on the accreditation of education providers is looking at standards for things like confidentiality and conflict of interest. Those are all standards that are part of the ISO NCCA standard set that I think will trickle down, or already have trickled down to the coach education providers. So we want to be really, thoughtful about that, and give programs time to respond to changes that we would make. But there are separate ISO standards for education providers. There's a standard for assessment-based certificate programs that's pretty clear, and it has a lot of similar elements around governance of programs and around. We haven't adopted that, but again, I think there's a lot of similarities there. And the whole focus of ISO and the NCCA standards and any other standards is that there is consistency and that there's fairness, that my experience in the process is the same as yours, and that a judgment made about me was made in the same way that a judgment was made about everyone else, so that no one has an unfair advantage. So I think some of those things are going to trickle down to the education providers as we move along. Is that answering your question?
It absolutely is. And one last little segue, if I may. So as things are evolving, because we've been around the ICF a long time, and we've been with all the dynamic changes, what's the system in place for us to get maybe not real-time answers, but be able to dialogue regularly to implement the changes or get clarity about the changes we need to make, et cetera?
As an education provider or as an individual?
As an education provider. Well, both, but as an education provider as it relates to this conversation.
I think as it relates to this, as an education provider, working with the leadership of the coach education part of ICF, which Luke Davis is the vice president there. I know that there's getting ready to be a conference, a convening of coach education providers. I think that is going to serve as an excellent platform to bring people together and to discuss what's coming and what some of the challenges are. But I would say that they would that Luke and the other folks from Coach Education would be happy to hear from hear all points of view on different things that are coming down the road.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And can I follow up with you to get that information?
Sure.
Okay, thank you, George. Have a great day and congratulations.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah, that's it, George, for the questions for this segment, so we can keep moving.
Okay. And I know we are, so I got to talk fast. Okay. So, so from our work, you know, to do from our research on the job analysis, the next step was to create assessments or exams or tests. Those words get used interchangeably, that reflect someone's understanding of those updated competencies, or really of our competencies. As you probably know, we had for a number of years used the Coach Knowledge Assessment, or the CKA, as our primary written exam, a multiple choice exam that we used to assess knowledge. That exam served us well. The fact that it was delivered in an unproctored environment, over time, we knew that it was overexposed. So following the creation of the updated competencies, the Credentials and Standards team, along with an ICF academic research team, partnered with experts in assessment development. And this was an organization called HUMRO, the Human Resources Research Organization, which really engaged with us on understanding coaching, looking at our job analysis, and we engaged in a really comprehensive process to develop an updated credentialing assessment that is reflective of the updated core competencies. We published this exam this past August, last month, and multiple stages in this process. So we created a test blueprint. We went through a process of item development, or item writing and validation. We constructed and piloted an exam, revised that. We did a standard setting exercise where we looked at what is the expected correct answer and how many would we expect someone to be able to answer correctly. And the term gets used, minimally qualified candidate. We want people to be more than minimally qualified, but they wanted to know where they can jump over the bar, or where that bar is that they need to jump over. We did launch the exam, and we're continuing to review the item performance and add new items to the exam, to swap out items as we go along. I'm condensing our presentation into one slide here, but the thing that I want to share is that along the way, the exam was informed by the research we did with the job analysis, but also multiple panels of coach practitioners from around the world who are our subject matter experts, who contributed to the review of the items, both for the content and relevancy, also for cultural bias and sensitivity. You know, the way the items are worded. And if you've never written an exam before, it is really difficult, especially with the nuanced meaning that is in an ICF that happens within coaching. So as I mentioned, the exam replaces the Coach Knowledge Assessment as the written exam used in the credentialing process. And it's really a measurement tool around how does someone understand the knowledge of coaching, the body of knowledge of coaching, but also with the way we wrote these questions, the ability to apply that knowledge in coaching in a scenario. And I'll talk a little bit about that here in just a sec. So the kind of a first step was to develop a blueprint. And a blueprint is really just the plan for the exam, and it provided information on where the source of the exam content should come from, and kind of the weights. And as you can see, the way that the exam blueprint is presented here in the 4 domains that we've identified, and then a percentage for kind of each of the subdomains there. For example, 13% for demonstrates ethical practice, pretty balanced. And one of the things that tells us is that all parts of the coaching competencies are important for people to know about and be able to put into practice. Some may be a little more important than others in some cases, but generally it's a pretty balanced exam. Again, covers 4 kind of broad content areas of the foundation, co-creating a racial relationship, communicating effectively, and cultivating learning and growth. And of course, those mirror the updated core competency model. A lot of text on this slide, but let me tell you that the exam that we developed and that we've published and is in operation right now, in production right now, contains 81 situational judgment test items. And a situational judgment item is a little more detailed than a traditional multiple choice exam. It contains a realistic scenario describing a coaching situation. And we took those from coaching situations or coaching scenarios that had been provided by our practicing coaches as subject matter experts. They wrote what we called critical incidents of what they did, what happened, what they said to their client, what their thought process was as they were thinking of what to say. And that's kind of the underpinning of how we wrote how a lot of these items were written. For each scenario, test takers, candidates, are asked to select the best response from the 4 choices given and also the worst response. There is only on the 4 choices, there's one what we've identified as the correct best response, and there's one correct worst response. And this little disqualifier here, some responses may represent more than one response may represent a reasonable response, but based on the input we got from our subject matter experts who were validating the exam items, we got clear consensus around which should be the best and which should be the worst. I mentioned earlier about communications and transparency. We want to be very transparent that the passing score is based on a scale score with a score of 200 to 600 possible, and a passing score is 460. Test takers can earn 0, 1, or 2 points per item. So they could get, if they don't get the best or the worst, they get 0. If they got the best or the worst, they get 1 point. And if they get the best and the worst, they get 2 points per item. Right now, we have launched the exam in English, and we have 9 other languages that will be coming online soon with language aids. And I think this slide includes a link to how to see what those are. And then over time, we'll be adding other languages. There also is, well, I'll talk about that in the next slide here. And again, my apologies for all the text on the slide. A really major change, and I mentioned it earlier, is around the need for security of our examination to make sure that everybody has the same opportunity, that one person doesn't have an unfair advantage over others. We know that with the former exam, the CKA, that some people had an unfair advantage because they either had, someone sitting in the room with them, or I don't know, the items have been out there for a long time. We took a step here to require that our exams, and again, in alignment with the NCCA and ISO standards, that our exams be delivered in a proctored environment. That's a major shift for ICF. And to do this, we partnered with Pearson VUE, who is a global provider of credentialing exams for a whole lot of organizations. There is a global network of brick and mortar test centers where you can go to take your exam, or there is an option for online exams that is remotely proctored. There's some requirements for the online proctoring where you have to have a camera on you all the time. You have to show your room to make sure you don't have extra materials, also to make sure that you don't have cameras or something that's capturing exam items so that you can share them with your friends. There are some requirements for identification, and all that information is on the ICF website around the steps. Right now, we are requiring all candidates for any ICF credential to complete the credentialing exam, even if they've passed the CKA before, because this again is based on the updated competency model. We have a process where once your application is approved, you receive an invitation, you get an email, and you have 60 days to schedule your exam. And during the exam, the actual seat time is 3 hours to complete the exam. There is the opportunity to request accommodations for documented medical conditions or other conditions that may impair your ability to have a fair opportunity to take the test. And there's a process that you can go through to create that, to request that. And again, this is probably this delivery model is very new for ICF, and we're still listening and learning about what changes we might need to make. I was on a call earlier today where we had discussions about breaks during the exam and those kinds of things. But we believe that this is part of having a credible, secure exam that is fair for all test takers. Okay, I have gone through a bunch of stuff here, so please let me know if you have questions. And if we don't get to them today, please contact me or someone on the ICF staff.
Yeah, so George,
Go ahead,
thank
Graham.
you. Thank you. We've got about 7 minutes left. I want to respect everybody's time. There are 2 questions, well, actually, 3 questions in chat. The first is from Rachel. Her question is, will there also be modifications available for neurodiverse test takers? For example, those who need more time or breaks?
Yes, there as part of the accommodations request process, that is something that we allow. We have we can grant accommodations for extra time, for a private testing room if you're going to a testing center, and some other accommodations to try to address those needs.
Thank you. From Sylvia, it's more of a comment than a question. She says she got her PCC in 2002, 20 years ago. Congratulations. As the first German coach from a live exam during an ICF conference in Sitges, Spain. It's great. Amazing how far the process has developed. I will go through recertification next year for the 7th time. So wonderful.
Very good. Congratulations. And I will say probably an important point is for renewal or for updating your credential, renewing your credential, you don't have to take the test. So you have to meet the standards of 40 hours of continuing coach education with at least 24 in core competency and 3 of those in ethics. But you would not have to take the exam again unless you leveled up to a MCC or
good to know. Thanks.
Okay.
From Kathy, does ICF offer practice tests for preparation?
We do not currently offer practice exams. There are 5 sample items on the ICF website that give you kind of an idea of the format of the exam. And again, those are sample questions that we pulled from the questions that we didn't use during the development. And I would anticipate that over time, someone is going to try to develop test preparation programs. You know, the one thing about the ICF credentialing exam that you know, I feel like you could have the book right in front of you, but the book doesn't tell you how to apply that. If you've been through a good coach training, good coach education program, and you've internalized an understanding of the competencies, that's what makes a difference. And so we even had discussion about should it be an open book exam, but we don't think that really, you know, there aren't any questions like, what's competency number 3, you know? So the more you can internalize the kind of the thought and philosophy and concept of a competency. That's what's important.
Great. Just a couple more questions, George, from Jackie. What happens if we don't pass the exam?
You have the opportunity to retake. There is a fee for retaking the exam, which I think is $105. And you will see a slightly different form of the exam if you do a retake.
Okay. And from Kibi Anderson, do you have data on the pass rate for the new exam?
I would say yes, we do, but we have a very small sample size right now, so I'm not sure how valid that data is yet. Let me say this, just so that everybody understands. For anyone who applied up until July 27th, if they got their application in before then, they are still taking the CKA. And they have until January 30, I believe, of 2023, that they could still be credentialed by taking the CKA. But anyone who applied on August 2nd on is required to take the new exam. And so far, we've only had about, I think 100, just over 100 exposures. And again, I don't want to, we're very pleased with the pass rate that we're seeing right now, but again, cautious because it is a very small sample size. It is something that we'll continue to look at. I will say a general comment. We think it is a more difficult exam than the CKA, where we had a very, very high pass rate, probably because it was such an overexposed exam, but still a very acceptable pass rate we're seeing so far.
Thanks, George. I did a quick calculation when you had the details up on the slide, and it seems that one needs to get 77% of the questions correct. 76
That's about right.
That's about right.
Yep.
In order to pass. Is
Yes.
that right? So
Yes.
when you take the exam, and assuming that you pass the 76% of all questions, what does your result look like? Does it just say pass?
You will get a report back that says that you have met the standard. And I can't recall, to be honest, whether we give I do believe we do present the numerical score, the scale score there. It's not a percentage score, but it is a scale score that we present to give you an indication of how far above the passing standard you were.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's a quick last question from Rachel. How many questions are there on the exam again?
81 scenarios. Each one has 2 responses.
Okay. All right, everyone. We are almost at the top of the hour. Does anyone have another quick question for George about credentialing? Okay, well, I'd like to remind you that this recording will be on ICF Orange County YouTube channel. We will also send around the slide deck that George has presented that also has additional slides on it about the credentialing process, some of which were covered in our 2 previous workshops, part 1 and part 2, but it's great to have this information. We'll get that out to you as soon as we can. And a big thank you to George Rogers from ICF Global, who's pulled together this presentation. We so much appreciate your support of our chapter and all the chapters of ICF, the ICF community, and for those on this call and everyone else who is a coach and looking to be a coach. So thank you again. And with that, we'll say have a great day.
Thank you all so much. Thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greta. Take care.
Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye, Linda.